with Reagan. If you remember, Reagan is going to be what we call a conservative. Now, conservatives, they tend to be Republican, and they like the following things, and we're going to see how this works. Number one, they believe in laissez-faire, going back to businesses, allowing them to operate how they want. Reagan does this in two ways, and a conservative will do this as well. And he does it through tax cuts, and he does it through deregulation, so they can make profit. And he felt that this was the way to best combat the inflation that Nixon and Ford and Carter could not overcome. The next thing is he doesn't like unions. Generally speaking, conservatives do not like unions. They feel that they actually hinder the growth of development, etc. And the last thing is trickle-down economics and supply-side economics. And Reagan actually has his own brand. It's called Reaganomics. We'll get there in a second. Now, where does this all start? It starts with something called Proposition 13. A California guy named Howard Jarvis will have a tax revolt. And this is basically businesses refuse to pay their big taxes. And so once this happened, Reagan sees, okay, if I can get the business people on my side, maybe I can work. So out of Proposition 13, there are two Reagan tax cuts, one in 84 and one in 85. And this is to free up money so that businesses are allowed to grow, make as much capital as possible. And this was key to starting Reaganomics. Okay? Now, this is supply side, but we can say Reaganomics if you want to. This is fine. And so you see up here at the top where it says, if taxes were cut. That's our Reagan tax cuts, right? So this starts supply side, Reaganomics, trickle down. It's all the same thing. The big thing is here, we're going to free up available money, and this money comes down here, all right? So this money is down here in this pot. Now, businesses are going to take the money, but it's also expected some of the money would go for an investment, a little side project out here. I'm going to build something. I'm going to invest in this company, whatever. The investments would promote more work. We have new products, and we have more workers. So unemployment would decrease, which is a good thing, and this would help to combat inflation in a stagnant economy. Profits would result, and the weird thing is, by the government cutting taxes, they are actually going to get more taxes because they're getting more personal income taxes from these new workers. At the same time, workers and management have more personal income to spend. It would create a demand for goods and services, people to create new jobs. And so the circle investment has benefited all. That's the theory of supply side or trickle down or Reaganomics. The one problem is, what happens if the businesses don't invest, if they just pocket it themselves? The big argument about trickle down is that you start with the top businesses, and by the time it gets to the lower classes, the middle and the low class, it has evaporated and hasn't affected much. However, Reaganomics is effective in fighting inflation, but it leads to the recession of 2008. It kind of just prolonged the things. Now, Reagan almost was shot. Well, he was shot. He almost died in 1981. 69 days after he's taken office, a man named John Hinckley, right here, will shoot the president. Attempt to shoot the president, and it did happen. 3 people actually were shot. They did get better, and Reagan was whisked to the hospital, and he will survive. Now, John Hinckley was obsessed with a movie called Taxi Driver, and he thought that by killing the president, he would attract the attention of a young Jodie Foster. So again, there's some unique things going on here. So what do we need to understand here about this Hinckley assassination attempt? 3 things that majorly change American society. Number 1, there will be no more public entrances or exits for a president. Reagan is seen coming out of the hotel waving to the crowd. That doesn't happen. They're going to take you to a back door at this point to protect you. Number 2, metal detectors are used in basically every building from here on out to protect. And probably the most important, we start having a discussion on how to limit gun violence. The guy who was shot in the head was named Mr. Brady, and Mr. Brady has a bill called the Brady Bill, which we will talk about tomorrow. Okay? Now, famously, Reagan was known for his one-liners, his jokes, and when he is shot, he gives 2 jokes, One was Nancy saw him and goes, "Nancy, I forgot to duck." And then the second one is when about he's going to be operated, he goes, "I hope you all voted conservative or Republican," something like that. So he was a man of laughter and jelly beans. Love jelly beans. All right. Now, we talked about that. The next thing is Reagan will deregulate 3 industries. He will deregulate the airline industry, the banking industry, and the telecommunications industry. He'll allow them to grow and kind of create these things. And in the 90s, there's several mergers that are threatening to almost become monopolistic in that way. But they do block it down. So deregulation is laissez-faire. It's going away from restrictions, okay? Now we move to this, PATCO, which is an air traffic controller organization union. They went on strike. And so this cripples the airline industry. And Reagan, the way he handled this was unique. He went on TV and threatened to fire them. And so they're still not backing down. In the end, a compromise is worked out. But this is, again, going to Reagan and his dislike for unions, even though before he was a governor, Reagan was an actor and president of a union, the Screen Actors Guild, which is a union, okay? The last thing about Reagan is how he manages to overhaul the Supreme Court. Now, this is not FDR. FDR wanted to pack the court. He wanted to add 6 more judges. Reagan just kind of has an opportunity afforded him, and that is the fact that 4 judges leave, and he's able to appoint these people. Now, the biggest one he appointed is Sandra Day O'Connor. She is the first woman to serve on the Supreme Court. It's a big deal. And in fact, all of his nominations were approved except for one. The man's name is Robert Bork. You might remember him from Watergate. He's the one that Nixon got to fire Archibald Cox. So for his involvement in Watergate, I'm thinking they probably just said, we don't want you. Now, the last little bit of notes, we're going to go back into affirmative action and just some kind of things, talk about his vice president, move from there, okay?